I'm Olivia, and today I want to give a full breakdown minute by minute of what my 4-hour plus study routine was when I first started learning Japanese. On my 6-month overview video, a lot of people were asking me in the comments what my study routine was, how much time I was dedicating, how I broke it up between all the different resources. This routine was what I was doing for my first 2 months of studying Japanese when I was still working through the Genki textbooks. And I know 4 hours sounds like a lot of time and that not everyone has that much free time to dedicate to learning Japanese, but one of my main strategies to get in this much time was trying to fit in Japanese into my daily routine. So even if you don't have as much time as I did, you can hopefully still use some of the strategies to try and fit in some more Japanese into your routine. And just so you know, I started this routine after learning hiragana and katakana. I only took about 1 or 2 days to initially learn about them and understand how they worked. But after I did that, I quickly dived into my routine. At first, I was really slow. I didn't have everything memorized as yet, but I just made sure that I understood how to use a kana chart. So whenever I came across a word that I couldn't remember, I could just look up on the chart to see what it meant. And then doing this repeatedly over time really helped me with my memory. So yeah, don't feel like you have to have hiragana and katakana completely mastered before you start doing any other learning. It's totally fine to be looking things up when you forget, and doing that is actually going to really help you remember it. Okay, so going back to that idea of fitting in Japanese into my daily routine, the first thing that I was doing every morning at the time was that I was working out. But I have not done that in a while. So what I would do while I was working out at home is I would just watch anime while I was working out. So I was watching shows that I had already seen in English, and I was rewatching them in Japanese without Japanese subtitles, and I just had that going on in the background while I was working out. And what I'd be doing is I'd be watching 2 or 3 episodes every morning, so that's 40 minutes to an hour. And this was a win-win for me because it made working out a bit more entertaining, and I was getting in a lot of time in to listening to the language. Because at the time, I could not understand anything that was being said at all. Okay, this is literally week 1, week 2 of learning Japanese, and I'm watching these shows in the morning. So I could not understand anything that was being said. I was completely going off of what I already knew from watching the show before and from the visuals. And honestly, it probably took me 2 weeks before I could even catch when characters' names were being said. Everything kind of just blended together. I couldn't parse out all the different words yet. But I knew that I really wanted to start listening comprehension from the very beginning, and I also knew that I wouldn't have the discipline to sit down and watch something for a full hour that I didn't understand at all. So I found that it really helps that I was doing it while I was doing another activity so that the time went by faster and that I didn't get bored. So yeah, if you want to try watching anime from the very beginning, try finding something to do while you're watching it. So you could be working out, you could be doing a hobby, a craft, because I knew just for me personally, I wouldn't be able to put in that much time into watching something that I didn't understand yet. So I found that multitasking really helped with that. Or of course, you could watch something that's made for Japanese children or for Japanese language learners so that you have a chance of understanding, and you'll probably get a lot better at listening comprehension if you do that. But for whatever reason, when I started, I didn't think of that and I was just doing anime. Now, the second thing that I do every day while I was getting ready, making my breakfast, brushing my teeth, is that I would listen to Japanese podcasts for at least 20 minutes. Now, of course, I didn't understand anything that was being said at the beginning, and I found it a lot harder to do than watching anime because I didn't have any visual cues and I didn't have any context for what was being said. Because unless I read the description for the podcast, I wouldn't even know what the topic was. So for that reason, I was using this podcast when I first started because it's a bilingual podcast. So all the hosts speak both Japanese and English, and they swap between the two throughout the whole podcast. So this made it a bit easier for me to listen to because even though I didn't understand the Japanese parts, the English parts gave me context for what was being said. And I figured that having that context for what was being said in Japanese would help my subconscious in making connections and recognizing patterns than if I was listening to a full Japanese podcast that I had literally no idea what was being said or what even the topic was. So I started with this podcast, and then I gradually transitioned to listening to the dialogues that are in the Genki textbooks when they're reading those long passages out, and then I transitioned to listening to full Japanese podcasts. So yeah, even though podcasts are a lot harder to understand when you're first starting out, putting it on in the background is a really great way to get your brain used to listening to how the language sounds. So at this point, I haven't even started my official studying for the day, but I already have in an hour of studying, and I didn't have to change anything about my regular daily routine to do that. But when I was ready to sit down and do my studies for the day, I would start out with my vocabulary, my kanji, all of the flashcard type stuff. So first up would be Wanikani, which is a website where I learn my Japanese, and I would start by doing lessons to learn new kanji. And when I first started using Wanikani, I was doing all the lessons as soon as they showed up, and I don't recommend doing that. It gets very overwhelming. I was doing 40 to 50 lessons every couple of days as soon as they became unlocked, and at first it was fine. I had the time to do it. I didn't really see a problem with it. But months later, it really caught up with me and all of my reviews kind of compiled and just became too much. And I actually had to completely stop doing new lessons and only doing my reviews for a long time until it became more manageable for me. So don't do all of the new lessons as soon as you level up. Spread it out over multiple days. It'll be fine and it will be better for you in the long term. If you try doing what I did, it will likely catch up with you and become overwhelming and you're gonna get burnt out. So don't do what I did. Just spread your lessons out over multiple days. And if you ever feel overwhelmed overwhelmed or feeling a bit burnt out, just stop doing the new lessons and just work on getting that review down. And after I was done my lessons, I would do my reviews for the day. And that morning routine for wanikani would take me 30 minutes on average. But like I said, I was doing my lessons really sporadically. So some days it would only take me like 15 minutes to do my whole wanikani routine. But other days it could take up to an hour. But usually it was in the 30-minute range. But wanikani is a spaced repetition system, so it will have reviews showing up throughout the day. So I would usually do 30 minutes in the morning, and then I would do a review at lunch that would usually only take like 5 minutes. It wouldn't be very long. And then another review at night that would take like 10 minutes. And then the next thing I do was do my vocabulary study. So I started out by learning the vocabulary from the Genki textbooks using Memrise. And I really liked it when I started out. It's pretty straightforward to use. It's pretty fun. It's very game-like. But months later, I transitioned to using Anki, which I think is a lot better of a tool to use long-term. And again, I was going way too fast with the vocabulary. I was sitting down and learning the entire chapter's worth of vocabulary in one sitting, and I do that every few days. And by the time I got to Genki 2, it was very overwhelming and my retention rate was really bad. I was forgetting a lot of the words from Genki 1. So don't dump a ton of vocabulary to do in one sitting. Instead, chunk it out and do a little bit each day. You could do 5 words, 10 words, 20 words, something in that range. But I unfortunately was not doing that, so I was probably spending about 45 minutes on Memrise every day. But because I was learning kanji with wanikani, I was skipping the kanji words in the Genki textbooks. So if I came across a word that used kanji, I was only learning the hiragana version of the word using Memrise. And then again with Memrise, I would sometimes do another review at lunchtime, but more often I would do a nighttime review that would take like 10 to 20 minutes. And then the last thing that I was doing every day during my first 2 months of learning Japanese is that I was going through the Genki textbooks. So I was studying my textbooks for about 2 hours every day, and I was going at a pace at about 1 chapter every 2 to 3 days. So I was able to finish both books in 2 months. And if you want to know more about that, you can check out this video. But basically my aim of using the textbooks was to build general understanding of the language and get some general familiarity with the grammar structures. I was very selective in the exercises that I was doing. I would only do exercises if I thought that they would be beneficial to me or if I was interested in doing them. But if it was an exercise that I just didn't want to do, I just skipped it. The main types of questions that I would do were ones that were based on listening comprehension or reading comprehension. I didn't obsess over completely understanding every single grammar point. As long as I generally understood what was happening, I'd move on. And I just trusted that I would eventually gain that deeper understanding through seeing it a lot in context. And another thing that I do sometimes when I was studying the textbook to make it a bit more enjoyable is I listen to Japanese music. I'd never listened to Japanese music before, so it was really cool to explore all the different genres and see if I could understand any of the lyrics. So yeah, that was just like a fun motivational thing. And if you also have never listened to Japanese music before and don't know where to find it, I'll link a Spotify playlist that you can check out that I was listening to that has a pretty broad range of different types of music. So yeah, that was the routine that I used until I finished both the Genki textbooks 2 months into my studies. But one thing I really want to say if you're watching this and you've been studying Japanese for a while is to not compare yourself to other language learners. I think it's really easy to be watching these types of videos looking for motivation and ideas how to fit it into your own study routine, but it can kind of spiral into feeling like you're not doing enough or you're not going as fast enough or that you wish that you were farther along on your journey than you are. Most people do not have 4 hours of spare time to study Japanese every day, and that is totally okay. So I'm definitely want to make videos about studying when you have less free time because I'm sure that's a lot more universally useful to all of you. It's very easy to watch these kind of videos and compare yourself to whoever's talking about their routine and feel like you're not doing enough or you're not going fast enough or you're not putting as much time in. And like that's something that I really dealt with too. At the end of the summer, I really felt upset because even though I had done a lot of studying in Japanese, I felt like I could have done more and that I'd never have that much free time to dedicate to it again and that I wasted it. Learning is really a process. It's going to be messy. Even if you feel like you're learning really slowly, learning one new word a day is learning one new word a day. You know one more word than you did yesterday. Like that's really great. And if you're making progress, you're making progress. Like learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes a lot of trial and error to figure out what works for you because you're going to learn the best if you're using materials that are really exciting and interesting for you to use. And that's going to be different for different people. Unfortunately, there's no perfect routine that you can follow that will make you fluent. Everyone's just trying to figure it out. Now, if you're like me and you love watching people talk about learning Japanese, I have a playlist that you can check out that goes into more detail about everything I talked about today. I have a in-depth guide on how I went through the Genki textbook. I have a tutorial on how to get started in using Anki, a video that explains how wanikani works and why I really like it. If you liked this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up so that even more people can find it. And that is all I have for today, and I'll see you soon.